Welcome to Board Ghost, a story broadcast with games as the engine.
If living is a highway, then heaven is a bus stop. Been waiting for a minute there, or has it been forever?
We believe you're out there, hungry for stories for shared experiences. Can't see you, can't hear you, yet we will play for you. This nice offering is the Skeletons. To learn how we generated our story playing the game of Skeletons, go check out our The Skeletons Primer. The Skeletons is a game from the Fiasco creator Jason Morningstar, and I believe you can pick it up on Bully Pulpit Games. Primarily, it is a print and play kind of game for a cheap PDF cost. All right, so our humble players, myself, John Holt, with me.
As always, Ken Breese.
Liza Cortright coming on back.
All right, welcome back, Liza.
Thanks.
And new to the show.
Leta Tremblay, first time.
Welcome,
Cool.
Leta.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so a little quick inside description of it. So years fly by like dead leaves. Everything is darkness. Everything is silence. You stand vigilant before the sarcophagus without thought of breath. Such is your compulsion. You do not remember your name, and still you watch. The flesh has fallen off your bones, and still you watch. And then one day there is a light and motion, and you weigh your bearded axe and raise your shield, lusting for the fray, eager to measure your skill against these tomb-robbing children so full of blood. You'll never be alive again, but in this moment, in the chaos between violation and destruction, you truly live, and you remember what you once were, and you taste the sun. Let's choose skeletons.
I am playing as the outsider. Your bones are unlike the others.
Ooh.
You carry a weapon that suits your frame and fearsome armor. And that's what I have here. My frame, if you guys can see, is really weird. It's sort of like elongated around the arms, really long arms, long fingers,
Oh, yeah.
really short sort of torso and short hips, and then really squat legs. And so I decided that my character is wearing the armor that is made out of like a carapace of like some giant insect, and then he has just a really long stave.
I'm playing horror. You were assembled, or summoned, or imagined by an unstable mind and made real. You carry no weapon. You are a weapon.
Yeah.
But you were adorned with jewelry. It says to sketch in the details. So it's kind of like a hook-handed bird kind of creature. I have added in a collar and then sort of bands on the forearms and the forelegs. Maybe they were manacles. Maybe
Well,
they
yeah,
were
that's
something
exactly
else.
what I thought. They looked like shackles almost.
Yeah.
But maybe, they're bejeweled shackles or something.
Yeah.
Or not.
Who knows what they were?
Who knows? Who knows?
All right, who are you playing?
I will be playing Arrow-Shield, who looks human from a skeletal form. A round shield peppered with arrows protects your bones. You carry a bearded axe. And so my shield looks like a planet of some kind.
That's cool. Yeah, it does.
And it is peppered with arrows. And my bearded axe has quite a small axe head and a literal beard
Yes.
growing off of it.
All right, and I'm playing the Silver Torc.
Yes.
So is another humanoid-looking skeleton who is decorated, whose collarbone is decorated with a silver torque, which is a band. It's braided metal in a usually Gallic or Britonian design. They also carry a blunted silver sword. All right, so the next step now that we have our characters is to sketch our map. It can be any general shape or size, but it needs to be built around a central sarcophagus and have a north, south, east, and west wall. And then we draw on the map where our skeletons each stand silent and watch the darkness while the tomb remains undisturbed. Cool, so we're all on the map. So let's talk about working together real quick.
Great.
So unless you're playing alone, you'll need to cooperate to reveal the skeleton's past and futures. This game will ask you to make choices, so we should decide how we're going to make those choices. Should we do it by turns, by consensus? Kind of feel like turns could be interesting.
Yeah, turns is great. We all know D&D and initiative, so I feel like that's something.
Plus,
that,
it puts everyone in a position of like you have to deal with what the
Yeah.
choices the other
Yeah.
people made.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sometimes something will happen to a single skeleton. The actions of intruders require similar cooperation. Consider giving a different player responsibility for each group of intruders and let them make all the decisions for that brief slice of time, and their skeleton can be still in that moment. So that's sort of an option. When you have skeletons and a map, turn out the lights and take a moment to breathe. Feel the silence. Imagine the wait countless years.
Rise and protect the tomb, skeletal guardians.
And so now an intruder has entered. Grave rats.
The grave rats have
How
arrived.
do you drive away such small, agile creatures
Yeah.
and prevent their return? Everyone can answer one question if they wish. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
So
Excellent
you'll
choice.
play the intruders.
I'm playing the intruder.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're grave rats. I like wake up, like my consciousness is very slowly rising to the top of the infinite sort of just oblivion that is my existence. My head maybe rises imperceptibly just by a centimeter. My awareness snaps back of my own control, and I perceive the sounds of the clawing, the sounds of these claws on stone and claws on flesh. And that's what wakes me up. It's almost like this clawing down the back of my spine that is just terrible. I hate it. I hate that sound. Even though I hate the sound so much, I would rather just stay in oblivion. But I can't. I am compelled to move forward. And so I start seeking out the sound, even though I have no idea really where it is.
How are the rats attacking?
At first, it's a slow invasion. There's just one rat that comes up through this grate, and it's almost unnoticeable. But then it sort of starts traveling toward the entrance of the tomb, sort of down this hallway here, along the wall, along the west wall. And then a second one pops out and is sort of exploring the this antechamber here, and a third, and a fourth. And then they just build and build and build until suddenly this whole floor here is covered with bodies. And so they're probably covering the silver Torc as well at this point and gnawing on his bones, continuing on from there through the tunnel.
What are we going to do, gang, to stop as skeletons to stop these grave
We
rats?
have to smash them. They must. I'm calling out telepathically to my comrades, saying, "Intruders, smash them, tear them."
Yeah, definitely. I don't have a nose anymore, so I can't smell them. But there's this electromagnetic tingle of life here, and it's not supposed to be here. I feel like the horror kind of unwinds its strangely shaped limbs from being curled up on the dais, and it can't really talk because it was never a person. You get the image of Fetch after taking a look at this situation and seeing where they're coming from. There's sort of the image of like the ruined tower and all the little rubble pieces that are filling that up. The horror carrying something in its beak and like putting it down the grate. It's like we could fill it up.
The Torc, sort of like rises up and shakes off these rats and skewers a few. Sort
Those are
of
the
flails
rat
about
noises.
wildly. The Torc will, work their way also towards the collapsed tower, which is a little bit treacherous because they have to go. Well, I guess they could just go around this way.
Yeah.
It's a little less treacherous that way.
Wading through the rats.
Yeah, no way to just slicing and dicing these singing Ben, the two of us.
I mean, you have a blunt sword too, so you're not even really slicing anything.
Just
You're
kind of
just
like
smashing
whacking
things.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like-
breaking their spines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stomping on them.
There's so many of them you don't even miss.
They're covering all of the floor surfaces at
right.
this point.
And they like
of
swarm up through our
the whole
ribs and
tomb.
stuff. too.
Oh
Yeah.
God,
They're,
they
like,
totally
popping out
are
of our
popping
eye.
out of our eyes.
Yeah, so they've absolutely reached
Just gnawing
the
on
outsider
desiccated flesh.
at this point. And so Arrow-Shield is oddly silent and still during this whole encounter. Perhaps the rats have completely swarmed and almost obliterated. You can't even see Arrow-Shield's skeleton. Arrow-Shield is no defense as they proceed down the stairs to the main sarcophagus room with the ever-blooming flowers and the horror waiting for them.
Seeing the Arrow-Shield is unresponsive, gonna kind of ungainly bound up the stairs, grab the shield, and just kind of start flinging it around in my beak,
Ah,
throwing rats as far away as possible.
Are there any windows in this tower?
I think it's not. I think it's almost like buried.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. The rats are gnawing at the flowers.
I say, make them eat the flowers. I'm in the hallway by the entryway, and it's like just this wave of rats is just sort of coming over me. I'm basically spinning my bow staff as quickly as I can, almost like a propeller at this point, that is just like knocking them off left and right. I'm also sort of like sort of kicking out with my feet and my sort of pointy skeletal toes to just like spear them. I'm moving actually quite quickly. And because my armor is so enclosed, it's weird because they're all inside my armor, rattling around in my skeleton. So it's like just this weird sort of like it's hard for me to move as quickly as maybe I normally do, but I'm killing tons of them.
I think maybe only one of these flowers blooms at a time.
Okay.
Like they're all in various stages of growing, but then like only one of them has ever like fully bloomed at once. And they seem attracted to that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to run over and like pull it out. I remember being able to fly, but I can't anymore because I don't have any skin or feathers or anything. Kind of ungainly flapping around, throw open this secret passage, and I'm trying to like Pied Piper these things up onto this bridge so we can just knock them all off.
The rats are falling for it. I mean, there are a lot of them, but many of them that are in this sarcophagus room with you are very attracted to this flower, and they're climbing up your body to get at it.
Are they eating the flower?
Absolutely. Any of them that are getting close enough to it are definitely attempting.
Definitely got the claws
Right.
all up in there.
The silver torque makes their way to the collapsed tower and actually goes down the chute of the secret thing
Secret chute.
and lands amongst these flowers and looks around for one in particular and plucks another one, but it's one that's looks like very young.
Nice.
And like grasps it and starts to crush it, and a fine like powdery smoke starts to exude, like a purple powder smoke, and it like starts to waft and fill.
I open the entryway to the tomb and start like shoving all these rats out the front, basically. Like there's this just wave of them.
Here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm opening the front of the tomb and using my bow staff to almost like a broom to just like sweep them out. Like just there's bodies of them at this point. Like they're dead bodies all around me and still live ones, but they're all together. I'm just sort of like sweeping them out of the front too. So there's this like carpet of dead rats now starting to accumulate outside the front.
Again, kind of trying to keep that fully bloomed flower out of the swarming horde and leading them kind of on a merry chase. You get a sense of kind of curiosity. Where are you? Can we work together?
Telepathically, I say duty has bound us to work. I am at the entryway. Guide them to
Yeah, and I definitely feel like no one's probably in the same room, but one claw comes up in a kind of like point gesture, like a pointing hunting dog. And yeah, definitely the start like using the claws to swing along the ceiling to get out of the way of the
cool.
rats, dangling the flower in front of them in the hopes that more and more of them will start falling.
They're not good jumpers.
Yeah.
But they want it. They're kind of climbing over each other's bodies and like creating these sort of like moving mound of rats as they sort of the mound sort of lifts up underneath where you are, but then as you move, a new mound forms in each
Nice.
place as you swing along, as the horror swings along the ceiling. Meanwhile, there are still rats pouring up in a seeming endless horde from the grate.
Oh, good.
In the, what is it, the
It's like a sluice gate.
sluice
gate.
room?
Where that polleny powder, this sort of dust is falling, it's starting to hit the other orchids in the room, and they also just wither.
Yeah.
And more of the pollen spreads, and and this almost purple black pollen mist starts to flow up out of the stairs and out. There's some tapestries that adorn the walls of the hall with the stairs, and they start to like desiccate and wither and just turn to dust. And the first of the rats that are caught in it shriek and just shrivel in on themselves as it starts to fill.
Yeah, it's almost like this powder is like eating the flesh off of the rats, right?
Yeah.
They're just like going down to not only
Flesh-eating
bones, but
pollen.
dust, right? The rats sort of become go all the way down to dust.
So it's almost like this ever-expanding, just sort of like particle mass.
Yeah,
Awesome.
just like spreading death.
I am sweeping rats out, and they keep coming back in, and I'm sweeping them out. They're just so small. There's so many of them. I've killed a lot of them, but they just keep on pouring all over me. They've infiltrated my armor. They're all inside of it and in my bones. They're pouring out of my face hole and my foot holes and my hand holes. It's just like, it's almost like I'm I'm an armor full of rats is almost what I look like at this point. I don't even look like there's a skeleton in here anymore. But I am moving like a humanoid. And as the cloud of pollen-y poison washes over me, there's a great shrieking scream that sort of echoes throughout my armor, as then what is left are only the bones of all the rats that are sort of tinkling out, tinkle, 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 as they're sort of hitting my bones. And it's a very odd percussive sort of almost wind chime, like one of those rain sticks, as all the bones are sort of pouring out the bottom of the armor. I'm just left with dead rat bones everywhere around me.
Getting this big mass behind me and having them just get desiccated by this pollen. Definitely trying to think about where the source of this is and how to help. But I kind of drop down from the ceiling next to the outsider and I'm like gesturing at my rib cage and like rocks on the ground, being like, fill me up.
Fill me up.
So I think we kind of like pack some rocks in there and then lumber over to the sluice gate and just start dropping them in.
Oh, nice.
Like just kind of like do a big like dog shake.
Yeah.
And all of these rocks just come tumbling
What are you
out.
doing with the orchid or the?
I still just kind of like have
It's
it
just in your beak?
It's like absent-mindedly. You know how the beaks have little nostril
Of
holes
course,
in them
yeah.
sometimes?
Yeah.
It's just kind of like poking out of there
Nice.
gaily.
Nice. Yeah. Adds a splashy color to our otherwise dreary existence.
Exactly. I think I remember what it smells like, and I'm pretending I can still smell it.
I haven't seen the orchid ever. I've only heard about it. So I'm like, ooh.
Pretty. Yeah, as these stones go down the grate, they seem to be falling a great distance, but they're also they also sound like small bodies are falling along with them into water far, far, far below. So it's definitely having an impact. But there are still some rats that are making it through. Is the purple mist dust cloud sort of permeating the entire tomb at this point?
Yeah, in fact, it's with the entrance closed again, it all is actually going towards one of the few sources, like other entrances. So it's, in fact, so you see this purple cloud kind of coming from both sides towards the sluice gate.
Sluice gate.
And the silver torque walks with it wafting around their legs, and they watch as it just pours down the grate and clears the tomb around them, but fills the grate and sinks down into and there's just this bitter smell. Like you can almost hear the water bubbling now.
Yeah. And
awesome.
that's
It
the
gets
only
all noxious and shit.
sound now. There are no more rat squeals.
rats.
And the torque, like as this cloud leaves and there's these little rat bones and bits of like dusty fur, sees a small silver ring on the ground that they recognize.
Ooh.
It's a ring that they used to have on their hand.
My question is, who here among the skeletons did you once serve and why? And I think I served Silver Torque.
All right.
And I served Silver Torque because I was a warrior from a faraway land who was brought here, maybe from birth or something like that. Like I'm some freak that was like raised in your whatever.
All right.
I'm sent to be a bodyguard, or rather serve Silver Torque.
What is your question to be answered?
By name did you earn in life that describes the fear your existence evoked? Looking down into the grate as this powder is falling down into it, the water is sort of turning to this horrible gelatinous ooze, totally black and disgusting. And it reminds me of hearing terrified screams of the Black Death.
We freeze exactly where we ended, right?
Yeah, so we sort of drop.
Yeah, we
into
sort of
our-
so.
Oh, we don't go back to our place?
As soon as the intruder's gone, we.
Yeah, no. So
Oh.
wherever you end the thing is where you end the thing.
Oh.
I was right in the front.
Oh, no, you all managed to come back here because you all put stones in the grate.
I didn't.
No, that was
Only-
just
on-
me.
Only
Oh, I
the
see.
horror, the outsiders in front of the entrance.
Choose once on either glory fades or God laughs.
I like God's laugh. Something from a skeleton's past has been accidentally revealed. What was it? Why was it hidden? Note this on the map. So I think something was brought up from the under, waters, as it were, by these grave rats. And I think what has come out is the horror's your original skull, which is a humanoid skull, like a human skull,
And where is it now?
in the sluice gate room.
And why was it hidden?
It was hidden so that you would never remember who you truly are.
We actually have to follow
Time passes.
a year.
A year goes by.
So we're going to sit in silence for 40 seconds.
Arise and protect the tomb, skeletal guardians.
A spirit of place, disturbed by the newly built tomb. How do you drive away such an ancient and immaterial presence? Everyone can answer one question if they wish. Choose once on either Glory Fades or God Laughs below. So it's a spirit of face and elemental, perhaps.
What about like a dryad or something like that? It has something to do with the flowers that are here.
Sure. Yeah. What if this was like a font of eternal? Like this was sort of like a spring of eternal life.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
well,
watched
we did just fuck up all the water.
Right.
Yeah, we
fucked
did
up
just
the water
fuck up all the water.
and we fucked up the flowers.
Yeah,
that, like,
exactly.
blossomed
Fucked up the
eternally.
flowers. Yeah.
So yeah,
Cool.
maybe it's a guardian of vitality, like it's sort of a dryad or a
Yeah,
another
like a
sort of-
naiad, like a water nymph.
Yeah.
Taken this year for at least some of that pollution to dissipate enough that they've
Exactly.
sort
so
of like made
it's-
their way through the
It's like
sludge.
a water weird. It almost is like an oozy type of presence. It's not a humanoid presence. It's more like almost just like this elemental sort of creature
Yeah.
that's coming up out of the sluice gate.
You guys awaken as there's like a rush of water, freshness that invades this tomb.
So for me, it's almost like taking that being awoken with like a deep breath out of a deep slumber and that sort of breath and motion sort of brings me to standing upright from literally a pile of bones that have sort of all sort of fallen apart at this point, and they sort of like come back into place exactly in this stacking motion as I stand up to my full height in the standing tower room.
The intruder right now is angered and pained and getting their bearings. So they're sort of
Yeah.
pouring around this space very quickly, just scouting and seeing what
Yeah.
sort of desecrations have been wrought.
Oh shit. I am rushing towards Silver Torque's location, which is where? It's in the sluice gate, right?
Yes.
I'm like almost like shouting telepathically, Silver Torque! Silver Torque! And I sort of come around the side. I know this thing is there. It's almost like I snap awake immediately, like that what I'm seeking has been on my mind for the entire year that we have been dormant. And as I come around the corner into the sluice gate area, I see this thing spreading. And I sort of like twist my staff, and it's almost like a natural reflex, and two tines spike out of each side, basically, as the ends of the staff split out.
Seeing this creature and seeing the outsider change something, we don't do a lot of changing of stuff. I think the horror is kind of like shocked a little bit, and two of the like manacles on two of its limbs kind of spark together. Very briefly, there's a re-emergence of like feathers, just like on its forelimbs, and it kind of like flaps around a little bit, and then loses the concentration on it and falls back down and is just looking around very confusedly.
Just to be clear on what this sort of being is, what is it? It's like a puddle?
It's a
being,
manifesting
it's
as sort of a loose sort of network of droplets and
Mhm.
and like occasional trickles of water, almost like when water like droplets gather on a window and start to streak down. It's that, but there is no window. It's just these sort of like, and it's more dimensional than two planes. So just collection of sort of like gathered humidity and water that defines what you can see of it moving about.
So Arrow-Shield sort of sees this more or less through the telepathic mind's eye of the horror and the outsider, and is loath to leave their post, but thinks they might recognize what this intruder is and what potentially they're angry about or after. So rather than going towards it, Arrow-Shield actually turns and goes down the stairs into the sarcophagus room and is frightened to see the desecration of the flower field.
Yeah, the watery thing is taken aback by these animated skeletons. It's not natural, and starts to coalesce and push out like blasts of superheated water
Oof.
that just kind of steam and scatter. They push you guys back and down, but they're not super effective. It's not super effective.
Yeah. Effective enough though, especially on me. I have my wide, thick armor on, so it's almost like you're hitting right into just like a flat surface. It's pushing me back. And so it's almost like a water cannon that's pushing me back, but I'm able to sort of spin to one side before the water cannon can realign and keep pushing me back. I stick the end of my staff onto the ground around and use it to leverage myself up onto the walls. I'm now running almost horizontally along a wall, then leaping across to the other wall, again using my staff almost like a pole vault. And the dexterity that I am exhibiting is just nuts. It's obvious that my sort of crazy, odd stature of very long arms and short legs and short torso, it really behooves me having so much power in my shoulders and in my arms to be able to, or at least I did when I had flesh. But at this point, I'm still able to magically, of course, do these same sorts of things. And I make my way into the sluice gate as I sort of spin my staff like a helicopter and try and basically cut into this thing. And as I'm doing that, I yell out something. Chug-chan! That's what I yell out.
Feeling sparked by sort of a variety of memory triggers. The weight of all the death that is here in this place is pressing on the horror, and the horror is made to do death, to be death, and to channel it. And so the horror has the thought and kind of bounds away. It's hard to do that. It's sort of the compulsion is to say it and just rend with claws, but there's enough cunning to know that that's not going to be it's not going to be super effective. So the horror kind of runs back into this room where Arrow-Shield is, and there are these like old markings on the floor in there. Mm-hmm. There's some puddles of dried wax. Yeah, in the tower. There's some dry, maybe even up on the second floor. There's some like dried wax from spells, and just kind of like plucking a couple of those off the floor, and just the temperature starts to drop.
So Arrow-Shield is in the sarcophagus room, and the field of flowers is just dry and dusty, and seemingly nothing is growing here now. Though it might seem counterintuitive, Arrow-Shield has this epiphany that this water being needs to be used to sort of reanimate these flowers, and that will protect the sarcophagus. These flowers are important to protect the sarcophagus. This is a helm of sight.
Yeah, a silver helm of sight.
So this epiphany is had, and Arrow-Shield is sort of reaching out to their companions to try to let them know that we have to get some of this element into the sarcophagus room.
As the horror ran by, the entity, this water spirit, noticed petals flowing out from inside of its skull and looks, sort of notices them and is horrified to see that there are these orchid petals. And
that's right.
Starts to chase towards that room. And as they get closer, the water temperature or the air temperature drops dramatically, and they start to take on more of a form and to slow. And they're like scraping this tall, like hulking being that scrapes the roof of the tomb and is hunched, fitting into it, kind of pulling themselves forward into this little circular staircased antechamber.
So the outsider runs across that sluice gate room to where Silver Torc is down, and sort of pauses for a second and telepathically says, Silver Torc, it is I, Chag-chan! You must remember! And he gets no response. And he's like, no! But feels compelled to continue as he rushes after the elemental creature and sort of arrives at its rear as it's sort of morphing into this thing. And that's when he just sort of spears it again with his one of the edges of his split staff as he starts attacking it in the back.
What is the result of this attack?
Not much. I mean, it's like cutting through water, basically, is what I feel like. There are some sort of like reddish runes that are starting to appear on my staff, as if it is sort of like magical, and it's reacting to this creature, so that while I'm not doing a lot of damage to it, I am hurting it to some degree. There are some cuts left in it.
Steams.
Yeah, steams coming sort of out of it. But it's not really focused on me or what I'm doing. I'm pretty small in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think seeing this slowly solidifying creature coming into the room below, the horror is going to kind of like jump back down and keep taunting it a little bit, having heard what Arrow-Shield said, and is going to try and kind of taunt it down towards the sarcophagus, darting in and out to try and keep it in this colder place for longer, in the hopes that it will solidify and be easier to destroy.
As it sort of moves towards this this being moves towards the sarcophagus room, Arrow-Shield is ready, standing at sort of the foot of the sarcophagus here and at the foot of the stairs. The horror is sort of taunting it down the stairs. And as Arrow-Shield sees the horror first, before the being, there's sort of this electric shock of recognition when Arrow-Shield sees the form of horror, and there's like a warmth that spreads where Arrow-Shield's heart used to be.
Oh.
And it doesn't know quite what to do with that feeling, but it acknowledges the presence of that feeling. And quickly behind horror comes, or slowly, or however fast this creature is moving at this point, comes down and the stairs, and Arrow-Shield sort of uses their shield to direct the semi-gelatinous, liquidy being away from the sarcophagus and around to cover the floor of the space. So it's sort of taking apart the form.
Yeah, like parting it around the shield.
Yeah, exactly.
As it moves through, it's getting sort of like parted from the front, and it's very much like looking past you and is pained, like what it's starting to have a face now and be more solid, and it's pretty like sad and horrified at what it sees in this dusty room with this tomb in it. I think that's when the like combined assault takes its toll, and this thing almost just like with a crack it flash freezes and expands and fills this whole passage.
So we're split. 2 of us are inside the room and 2 of us are not.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what is the horror and
Yeah.
Arrow-Shield are in here?
Yeah, Horror and Arrow-Shield are with the sarcophagus. Chog-Chan, the outsider, is at the bottom of the tower, and Silver Torc is on his back in the sluice gate.
All right. And so do you guys, before we go, you want to kind of recap the questions you answered?
Totally. My question is, what is your name?
And say it one more time.
Chog-Chan.
Chog-Chan.
All right. Liza, what about you? What did you answer?
I didn't, actually.
Ooh, what question are you going to answer?
I don't think I have anything right now.
Whom did you once love?
Ooh, I think we know.
All right, in that case, I will.
Yeah, good. What
It'll
question?
be, who here among the skeletons once treated you with kindness?
Oh.
Ah.
Arrow-Shield. All right. So having destroyed this creature, time's going to start
Time
passing.
passes
First,
yet again.
choose from either glory fades or God laughs as to what's going to happen to us.
There's one of these that kind of leaps out to me as making sense for what just happened.
Awesome.
I think it's something the skeletons are protecting is damaged.
Ooh.
What? And how?
Ice just exploded everywhere.
Right.
Do you think this ice? So this whole passageway is full of ice.
Mhm.
I feel
Did
like
it get far enough that there's sort of ice like waves almost that have like parted in front of Arrow-Shield? Excuse me.
maybe it even damaged their sarcophagus a little bit
Yeah.
too. Like it
Yeah.
broke off a piece of it.
I think the face that was on the sarcophagus
Ooh.
has it's been defaced.
been
Did the horror get caught up in the ice?
Partially. One wing.
Right.
Right.
Because they're basically at the bottom
Uh-huh.
of the stairs.
D-wing.
Yeah, we're kind of staring straight at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we will now go into time passes. Wow, a week.
A week goes by.
Arise and protect the tomb, skeletal guardians. Giant tomb spiders, intelligent and graceful. They are stubborn, clever, and hard to dislodge. Do you destroy them? Do you reach an understanding? How? Everyone can answer one question if they wish.
The spiders, they, I think, crawl in through the cracks in the destroyed tower. So if you guys remember, there are 2 minarets that at one time sort of poked out from the top, out of the top of the sort of the rock face that this tomb has been built into. And one of them was crushed and collapsed. during the ancient times. Apparently, there was enough space within it for these very graceful tomb spiders to make their way in. They are clever enough that they've actually been pulling rock away as well. So they've made a passageway for themselves. So basically what's happening is it's like the sound of rock hitting stone is like one little rock does, and then another larger rock, and then a large rock like clonk. And that's when they sort of it's a mated pair that comes in, and they sort of like are just coming down the ceiling, basically, and the walls of the crushed and destroyed tower. Slowly. They're coming down very slowly. They're not making any noise, but the rock's made.
And we're all linked to this tomb. Every rock here is like unto one of our skeletal bones. As the new intruders enter, there's that call inside, the impossible to ignore. The ice hasn't melted, has it?
No,
No.
certainly not.
No.
Yeah. So I think the horror is like trying to pull itself free from the ice. And I think it manages to like get a little bit, but there's just like one of its wings is totally encased in ice and it's kind of like dragging it along behind it. Pulls the arm straight out of the socket and it's just kind of pulling itself along towards the secret passage and kind of nudging at Arrow-Shield like with its beak,
Mm-hmm.
which feels almost familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
mm-hmm.
Time to wake up. There's something here.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to be stealthy up the secret passage and is kind of figuring out, I'm used to moving with an extra limb and now I don't have it. Yeah, it's kind of an unsettling.
Arrow-Shield is obviously horrified that Horror is now disfigured and has lost a limb. And so rather than go directly to the intruder, Arrow-Shield's first action is to try to hack the wing arm out of the ice with their small-headed, bearded axe. And they're making some progress, but they also want to be very careful to keep the whole thing intact. That's sort of the very first thing that they attempt. It's slow going, but they are making progress. As the axe comes down near the manacle starts to glow and start emitting a heat. And there's also a stripe around, sort of like a candy stripe that goes around the whole handle of the axe that starts to glow in response.
Nice.
And it redoubles, it sort of gives Arrow-Shield this sort of vigor to redouble their efforts. And with one final whack, the ice sort of explodes off of the winged arm in a shower of ice particles and warm liquid and steam. And the wing sort of hovers over the ice. It doesn't fall to the ground, sort of self-animated.
Silver Torc gathers themselves, stands, reaches for their weapon. They're near the grate. Their sword had fallen and was actually splashed with the Icarus stuff. So now the silver is marred and marked and etched with this black ichor. And they grab the silver ring that they saw earlier and start ambling their way around circuitous route to head off the spiders.
Totally. I mean, for their own part, the spiders, I think, are in like exploration mode. They are not trying to hunt. They're trying to find a place to make a nest. And so they're actually liking where they are right now as they start to like squirt webs sort of on the ground and on the walls. And then they just sort of sit there and they sort of like try and listen to the vibrations around them. And I think that they do sort of hear or feel the weird staccato movements of the horror. I don't think that they've noticed Silver Torc yet. But yeah, that's sort of what they're doing. They're webbing the walls and the ceiling and sort of making a little nest for themselves, or beginning to.
Despite the change in mobility, the horror pushes or is beginning to push through the secret door because they were traveling up the secret passage.
Right.
Meets with more resistance than expected as it kind of shoves some of the newly sprung webbing out of the way.
Yeah.
And probably, again, with the new change in coordination, kind of spills out onto the ground and maybe a little caught up in the webbing. And it's like looking up at these creatures.
Yeah, I think the creatures are standing stock still. Maybe one of them has its forelegs sort of raising up very tenuously or tentatively, but they're just observing.
Yeah, and
so crouched, obviously ready to spring.
Watching these legs kind of move like that, horror starts like moving its claw in a similar pattern, and it's like you hear it tap like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's like I think the other skeletons feel, because not on the talking,
Mhm.
feel this like overwhelming sense of wonder. Oh my God, so many legs. It's amazing. Kind of getting freed, the horse kind of like rolling back on its back, like showing its belly.
Arrow-Shield has been keenly aware of sort of Horror's journey up this slide and now is feeling that awe that they are experiencing with the winged arm in tow sort of trailing behind it like a puppy. It also travels up the slide using the axe in one hand to sort of go against the wall and sort of gain momentum, and the shield on the other side. So they're sort of like ice climbing sort of up this smoothed surface, making grooves in the slide entryway until it emerges behind the horror into this room and stands beside them and presents the gift of their lost wing arm. Even though the presentation is kind of awkward because they're rolling around on the ground, the Arrow-Shield sort of stands there sort of with this like wanting to make a ceremony of the moment and also being aware of the rolling and of the still many-legged creatures overhead.
The silver Torc comes upon this scene and sees that there's no overt, knows there's no overt conflict, that there's no fighting going on, and walks over to the secret passage and jams their sword into the passage and snaps it off. So now the door won't turn.
Yep.
And then starts to amble back out of the room in a way.
One of the spiders is stock still, and you guys get the sense that it's like crouching and ready to spring and take action if needs be. But the other one is making more sort of sinuous or sort of like, they look unintelligible, but they're making motions with their like antennae. They don't have antennae. With their mandibles.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're clicking their mandibles and like moving their legs towards you and stuff like that. It's like they're trying to communicate with you, maybe.
Yeah, so as the arm with the fourth manacle on it kind of comes into the room, the horror like freezes and the other three legs like shoot straight up in the air. The fourth manacle comes flying towards them and reattaches.
Oh.
And there's just this kind of like burst of magical energy. There's also this brief flickering energy that looks almost like a chain going, like disappearing off from the manacle that's around their neck.
Yeah.
When all four of the manacles are together, the horror kind of like slams them together, and there's these, again, that's, where before there was feathers, there's now like four more like ghostly looking legs.
Ooh.
Oh.
And it's like starts waving its arms back at the spider and like clicking its beak.
The Arrow-Shield doesn't know quite what to make of any of this that is happening right now. It sort of is looked off as the silver Torc has done their business and ambled away, and this strangeness that is happening with the horror, and also these beings don't seem, again, like they are attacking. Arrow-Shield thought the revelation was going to be that they have no desire to injure these creatures, that are showing no overt ill will in the destruction of their friend or of the tomb that they are guarding. And so they sort of like remember this name, Aerosmith the Compassionate.
The silver Torc takes their broken, blunted silver thing and basically starts to like scratch into the things, little like nose spiders in certain rooms.
Okay.
And just so it's really like in this area and back in this door, like just saying stick to your area and we'll be fine.
Totally. I think the spiders are clever enough, and you guys have been able to communicate with them, that they actually vacate the broken tower and they take over this like unused walkway that's between the two towers. One side of which has been sort of crushed for the most part, where the other, where the tower on one side was destroyed. So there's that sort of like higher up walkway between the two minaret towers that they now have sort of taken over and turned into their webby den. And it because they're so close to the top of the whole complex, any other animals that are sort of coming in sort of come their way instead of yours, since they've been able to sort of put these rocks back into place and sort of cover up any entryway into the broken collapsed tower. Time passes, but don't forget your memories or what you might learn, questions you might answer if you haven't already done that, and then that's exactly right, Leta. We need to choose off of one of those.
So why don't we go around and so Ken, you were the monster.
Exactly. So the outsider Chag-Chan was silent and unmoving. He is stationed basically directly in front of the ice is where he is.
Oh, here, yeah.
Yeah, he's
Mhm.
he's in the tower, not the collapsed tower, the other tower. He's in front of the entryway that would normally does lead to the sarcophagus in the middle of the tomb, but it's that tunnelway or that passageway has been filled with brittle, hard ice, and that's where he was fighting when the creature was destroyed, and so that's where he is now stationed.
All right. What do you recall?
The
Or do you
question I was going with, and it's slightly different, is what connection do you have to those you've just killed or driven away? And in this case, we didn't really do that, but we encountered them, right? It says, what memory did they evoke? And I think that the horror was having a memory of like their early life, of being with other like weird hybrid creatures
Yeah.
that had many different, like the different numbers of legs, and like trying to learn to communicate. Like that's something they had to go through, and they're kind of remembering that there used to be other things, not
Yeah.
necessarily exactly like them.
Yeah, but you felt a part of belonging and
Mhm.
kinship.
Exactly.
I thought I was discovering simply my by name as as the compassionate, though I potentially don't necessarily know how that came about yet in
And
my past.
It could
life.
even be a sarcastic thing, too.
It could potentially be a sarcastic thing, but somehow the phrase Aerosmith the Compassionate feels like
Feels right.
identity.
Yeah.
And my kind of looking at this ring that was on their finger as they amble around, we can make out some of the etching on it. And it reminds them of who they once loved. There's a name on there. And they recall that they once loved a man in their past.
A memory that a skeleton had previously regained is false, and the truth asserts itself. Which memory and what truth?
All right. So which skeleton do we want to have that effect?
She's pointing at you, Silver Torque.
Yeah, no, I thought
point-
you had a.
Point-
Sure. Okay. So, and it asserts itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as the ring, I recognize, no, I did love this person, but this ring was not mine.
Yes.
And it belonged to whatever is in the sarcophagus.
Yes.
Nice.
You were in love with whatever was in the sarcophagus.
Or
whatever.
something. Yeah.
Love triangle.
Love triangle.
Or,
Yeah.
heptagon.
Cool. Very good.
A month.
A month passes.
Month passes.
This is very eventful, too.
Yeah, sure
Yeah.
is.
We'll return again with Arise, Guardians.
Yeah,
la,
that
di, la,
makes
la, la.
sense. Yeah.
We interrupt our story here, and we'll resume in our next communique. As one of your players, John Holt, you can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho, and you can find me on Instagram at board_ghost, and you can find my other podcast at newtoyoushow.com. Ken, where can people find you?
Board Ghosts, find me on Twitter at Berlingsbeard, Berlings Beard. Also, check out my live stream on Twitch on Wednesday nights. We're playing D&D. How about you, Liza?
I don't exist on the internet.
This is Leta Tremblay, LetaTremblay. I have a website, so I am letatremblay.com. I'm also on all of the social medias at Leta Tremblay. It's very easy to find me. My theater company is Caps Lock Theater.
To learn more about the players and the engine in our story, visit boardghost.com. You can attempt to pierce the veil and contact us at BoardGhostWorld on Twitter. Shout out through the ether if you have desires we can fulfill. Please leave reviews and comments on iTunes, your preferred listening portal, and take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episodes. We'd like to thank Pat Couples for our theme song and interlude music. You can find more about Pat at patcouples.tumblr.com or on his band's website, hotelsandhighways.com. If you're not alone in the void, share our stories. The more they are consumed, the truer they become.
Dying, don't agree with me.